I'm James from Diamondback Archery. Today I'm going to talk about FOC, forward of center, on your arrow. And what the FOC is you calculate the distance between the center of your arrow and the balancing point of your arrow. Now, there's a lot of different opinions on what that percentage FOC should be, 12 to 8% or 8 to 12%, 7 to 15% or 9 to 18%. I found, my opinion is if you go 10% or more, and the more the better. 20%, 30% is if you can get that much, your arrow's going to be a better hunting arrow. When you shoot your arrow, it wants to follow the point. If your point's too light, it'll drift easily. Just a slight wind will blow it off course. If you have a nice heavy forward of center, it'll just follow that point, slice to the wind a lot better. You'll have better downrange trajectory, and it'll be a lot more lethal arrow for a hunting arrow. Some people say if you're too far FOC, too much FOC, your arrow will nosedive downrange. I haven't found that to be true. To calculate the FOC is real simple. You take your arrow, you're going to measure it tip to tip. The whole nock all the way to the tip of your field point or your broadhead, whatever you have on it. This arrow is 30.5 inches. So half of 30.5 inches would be 15.25 inches. So I'm going to measure 15.25 inches from the nock end of my arrow. Put a mark with the marker. Then I'm going to find the balancing point of this arrow. I'll just use my finger. You could use a screwdriver, whatever you got. Okay, there's the balancing point. I'm going to put a mark there. I'm going to measure from the center of the arrow to my balancing point, which is 3 3/4 inches. That's 3.75 inches. So take your 3.75, divide it by the length of your arrow, the overall length of your arrow, 30.5. And you can times that by 100 to get a decimal. This arrow is 12.3% FOC. It's more than 10%. I'm happy with that. So I know I could use this arrow to tune my bow if I need to go with a heavier point to get the proper shaft stiffness or spine. I could do that, but I probably wouldn't want to go lighter than what I have on here. If you're less than 10%, you could add a heavier point and then do the calculation again, because it's going to change your balancing point, so do the measurements again. Or if you're close, you could use smaller feathers. You can move your feathers farther forward, which I don't really recommend. The further back they are, the better a flight you're going to get. But you could use, if your bow's tuned well, you could use 2-inch feathers with the broadhead. They'll work fine as long as your bow's tuned well with your arrows. And if you use wraps, I wouldn't. Don't use wraps. It's just extra weight. They look cool, but it's extra weight that you don't need on that end of the arrow. Best way to start is get light arrows. I like gold tip Pro Hunters. That's what I use. I've been using these for several years now, and I really like them. They're fairly light arrows, and this is only a 100 grain point on here, and I have 12.3% FOC. So that's a good arrow to start with. There's a lot of good arrows, carbon. I prefer carbon arrows, but there's a lot of good arrows out there. But I wouldn't even bother tuning your bow unless you're over 10%. Don't use that arrow to tune your bow if you're under 10%, because you're just not going to get the best arrow flight you can. And just, you know, it's my opinion on the 10% or more. Do your own experiments. I think if you find, a lot of people are worried that if I use a heavier point, a heavier arrow, it's going to really peter out. I found that to be true. If you take a 100 grain point like this arrow and change it to a 200 grain point, and at 30 to 35 yards, there's only a couple inches of drop. That's really not much. It's easy to compensate for, and it's better to have that better flying arrow than you might lose a few feet per second. That's not important. What's important is a good arrow flight. And for more information on tuning your bow, once you have your arrow that's got the proper FOC over 10%, you can check out my video on YouTube, tuning traditional bows. Thanks for watching. Check out my website at diamondbackarchery.com, and I hope these pointers help you out.